It's Christmas, 1993, and you've been staring at that gift under that Christmas tree for the last 3 weeks, just dying to know if it's that one thing you've been asking for all year. Well, if you love that good old nostalgic feeling, you've found the right video. And we are about to travel back in time to 1993 because this is retro unboxing. Aren't you at all curious? And if you like what's inside here, be sure to stick around for the second half of the video because we're gonna do a little time traveling to Christmas 1995 because these two belong together. So do you think you can guess what Santa brought? Or are you curious? One of the most exciting times of year for me as I was a kid was opening that Christmas gift on Christmas morning, just hoping that it was one of those things that I asked so dearly for. So let's see, Christmas 1993. It could be Beanie Babies, or it could be the Talkboy. Everybody wanted a Talkboy. Or depending on who got you the gift and how out of touch they are, it could also be a Tickle Me Elmo. Well, whatever it is, we're about to open it. And once we do, we're gonna unbox it and we're gonna play with it. And without further ado, the funnest part. Where to start? You always gotta start at one of the seams. Were you one of those kids that like completely ripped the whole paper off? Or did you try and take it apart at the tape? I was one of those kids that ripped it all apart. Oh my God! It is what I always wanted. Santa, you shouldn't have. Now, here's a gift that probably not many kids got. And not because it was too expensive, but because probably a lot of kids just didn't want it. This is an Atari Jaguar. Look at that. Boy, for about a dozen of you, if that doesn't just take you right back to Christmas 1993, right? And for the rest of you watching, you're probably wondering, what the hell is an Atari Jaguar? Well, good news. We're about to open it up and find out. All right, so if you are unfamiliar, this was the very last home video game console that Atari ever brought to market. And as you've heard me repeat a number of times, it was November 1993. Now I know what you're saying. The Nintendo 64 was actually the first 64-bit console to come to the market. And that didn't come for a couple years after this. Well, you're right. And this comes with a little bit of a caveat. You see, technically, this was two 32-bit processors, and they used clever marketing to market it as the first 64-bit home video game console. I mean, it really depends on how you want to look at it. 32 plus 32 is 64, but it is not one 64-bit chip that is operating this video game console. But in 1993, Atari launched this console to compete in the 16-bit market. So this thing was actually competing against the likes of Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, the 32-bit add-on to the Sega Genesis, the 32X, and the 32-bit console, the 3DO. So marketing something like this, 64-bit console, is sort of a big deal. And technically, like I said, it's two 32-bit custom chips inside there. So it really depends on how you want to look at it. This wasn't supposed to compete with the Nintendo 64, at least not immediately. And the thing that actually made this a little bit different than a true 64-bit console like the Nintendo 64 or even the PlayStation 2 is the fact that none of the CPUs inside the Jaguar had a 64-bit instruction set like a Nintendo 64 or a PlayStation 2 for that matter. Check this out. Read me first. Your Jaguar is being shipped with an upgraded automatic switch box. When referring to the user's guide, please note that the manual switching between TV and game operation will not be required. Ooh, Mom got me the fancy one. The Jaguar automatic switch box has 2 wires attached to it, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, this one here is actually more of an upgraded version. So this may have not been one that would have launched in 1993. We got our Atari Jaguar user's manual, which, you know, all of us read through. Look at this. We got a little advertisement, not little actually, for the Atari Lynx. Who remembers the Atari Lynx? This was Atari's answer to the Game Boy or the Game Gear. And of course, we get Atari's pack-in cartridge, which was Cybermorph. If you guys remember, you know, back in the day, a lot of consoles used to come with pack-in games. That sort of thing doesn't really happen anymore. But there we go, Cybermorph. I actually always thought the way that the Atari Jaguar cartridges were shaped, I thought it was really cool. I also really liked the console itself. You know, really, if you think about it, it doesn't look too dissimilar to a Nintendo 64 if you've never played one of these before. The real standout here, and I say standout because it kind of depends on which side of the line you're standing on, is the controller. The Atari Jaguar controller caught a lot of heat. It was an interesting one. I personally didn't mind the Atari Jaguar controller that much. It was pretty simple. Let's not talk about this bottom half right away, and let's just focus on what it really is. It's a 3-button controller with a D-pad. So it's essentially a Sega Genesis controller. That's really what it was. But what Atari did is they added this little number pad here to the bottom, which allowed for 11 different additional inputs in any one of the games. And sort of the cool thing about the Atari Jaguar controller is, much like the Intellivision controller, some of the games came with inserts that would lay over the top of this and show you just exactly what these buttons would do for inputs in the game. So yeah, console came with one controller like most other consoles that launch. It also came with good old-fashioned RF adapter, and it also came with a set of AV cables. So, you know, like a lot of consoles, you could do RF or AV. Who remembers having to screw these in? I used to love the quick attach ones, the ones that would just pop on. Those typically didn't last super long though. And of course, we got the Atari Jaguar power adapter. It looks very similar actually to like a Sega Genesis power adapter. In fact, it might actually be the same. I'd have to double check that. And of course, there it is. We have the booklet for Cybermorph. See, check this out. This was for Cybermorph. You would just pop this into the controller like that, and now you have a custom Cybermorph controller. And this would tell you, you know, your super weapons, and toggle, and forward, and all that other cool stuff. So, yeah, I don't know, like, it was neat. And, you know, holding this thing now, in retrospect, it's not terrible. I mean, the obvious exclusion here was the shoulder buttons, and this was long after the Super Nintendo, which had shoulder buttons. So I really don't see why they didn't just put those on there to begin with. It feels naturally like you just want to hit some shoulder buttons on that thing, but, you know, Atari was trying something different, certainly trying something different. The interesting thing about the Atari Jaguar is actually it was manufactured by IBM. And of course, you all want to know what Mom paid for this thing as a Christmas gift, and that was $249.99. So this thing retailed back in 1993 for $250, which I will say for the time is on the upper end. It's not like the craziest, most expensive video game console to have ever come out. That goes to the Neo Geo and then to the 3DO. So, you know, it's not like a $600 console, but $250 back in the day was on the upper end, right? Most everything was launching either at $149 or $199. Had a couple consoles launch at $249. The other really fun thing that I think I should point out here is I did tell you there were two 32-bit processors inside this thing, which made it 64 bits. The processors were actually named Tom and Jerry. And it did have a Motorola 68000 processor in there as well. So technically, there were 3 processors in this thing, but none of them were 64-bit. Just 2 of them added up to 64-bit. So clever marketing on their part. They were sort of ahead of the curve there. The other really interesting thing about Atari in this era was Atari did have plans on releasing a console a little bit sooner into the 16-bit console era. They were developing a video game console called Panther. And that console got pretty far into development before it was canceled and scrapped. The whole idea was scrapped, and they moved forward with the Jaguar. They were trying to get ahead of the curve, but unfortunately it didn't work out so well for them. Now, how well did the Jaguar do at launch? Well, unfortunately not super well. The biggest problem is it didn't have a huge launch lineup. There were really no killer apps for this thing. It certainly didn't launch with something like a Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog or a Halo or a Crash Bandicoot or something like that. It really didn't have any one title that set the world on fire. And a lot of that was the fact that developers were already pretty much fully on board with what like Nintendo was doing, what Sony was doing, and what Sega was doing. At the time, there really wasn't a lot of space in the market for another console. And it's unfortunate because, you know, Atari is what I would consider one of the pioneers or grandfathers of the home console market. They are also kind of responsible for killing the home console market in the early 80s. Thank you, E.T. But that's for another video. One of my favorite games, and one of the games that I got for the Atari Jaguar when I got one, was Bubsy. I loved Bubsy. It was kind of a platformer. If Atari had any mascot or anything close to a mascot, it probably would have been Bubsy. In a second here, we are about to hook it up and play it. But first, like I promised, we're gonna do a little bit of time traveling, okay? So we are going to pretend that it is now Christmas of 1995. Now, in the beginning of the video, I'm sure you were like, what the hell are these two things 2 years apart and why would they go together? But if you know this console, then you probably know. But let's pretend anyways, right? Oh, so satisfying. Oh, Santa, you didn't have to. Where did you find something like this? My God. Look at that. Oh, look at that. They followed suit of Sega. Even after Sega wasn't doing super hot with it. This is the Atari CD, which is a Atari Jaguar add-on, exactly like the Sega CD was. You know, when Atari launched the Jaguar, they launched it with cartridges. That's what your game was on. But CDs had not only started becoming really popular, but the media itself became a lot cheaper. And the colors on a CD were like way better than that of a cartridge. So what exactly is the Jaguar CD? Well, let's open it up and take a look. Ooh, oh, look at that. They even gave us a bumper sticker. And they really loved advertising that whole 64-bit thing, didn't they? I mean, you can't blame them. It's good advertising. Let's see what we got here. Oh, nice, fresh, new. Oh, and some pack-ins as well. Look at this. These are still sealed. I forgot it came with a demo of Myst. Check it out. Myst on the Atari Jaguar. CD. And we also got Blue Lightning, which if I remember correctly was obviously an airplane game. Save this one for last. This is VidGrid, okay? So VidGrid was really, it was an interesting experiment. This actually wasn't a game. If I remember, this was like it was music. It was a music visualizer that played in the CD-ROM attachment for the Atari Jaguar that was meant to show off like all the different colors and stuff that the Jaguar CD was capable of processing. In fact, yeah, we got Aerosmith, we got Crying by Aerosmith, we have Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel, November Rain by Guns N' Roses, Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix, Inner Sandman, Metallica, Spoon Man, Soundgarden, Right Now, Van Halen, Ozzy Osbourne, Red Hot Chili Peppers. This was kind of a banger of a playlist there, so that's kind of cool. Maybe we'll check that out. This right here is one of my favorites, though. This is Tempest 2000. This came as a pack-in. If you remember the original Tempest, this is like an evolution of Tempest. I really, really enjoyed this. Although I think that this is probably just the soundtrack, if I remember. Yeah, this is just the soundtrack to Tempest. But, you know, a lot of their ploy for this thing was the audio quality. Okay, so that's kind of what they were really selling. So let's take a look at this thing. All this thing does, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I really messed with this, but this was a lot easier than the Sega like CD add-on, if I remember correctly. So it just plugs into the cartridge slot like that. And yeah, so there's just a power source for the CD player and a power source for the console, and they both share the same video output. And I should point out too that the Atari Jaguar only had 2 controller ports. We all know the Nintendo 64 was like designed, built, purpose was, you know, for couch co-op. That thing was meant to be played with your friends. The Atari Jaguar, I don't know, maybe it meant you didn't have friends. Very few people had the Atari Jaguar. So anyway, the Atari Jaguar had an introductory price just 2 years later of $149.95, so 150 bucks for the add-on, which is about on par with what like Sega was charging for the Sega CD, and an add-on like that seems totally reasonable. Now, it's been a long time. I was in my mid to late teens when all this stuff came out, but if I remember correctly, the Jaguar itself had already dropped in price by the time the Jaguar CD add-on had come to market. In fact, Atari was hoping that the CD add-on was just really going to breathe new life into what was already a dying console. You know, looking back on this now and thinking about it, what a terrible idea, because I think the Jaguar was already dead by the time the Jaguar CD came out. But, you know, one can hope, right, Atari? Personally, even at the time, I really liked the Jaguar. I always wanted one. I always thought they were super cool. And maybe it was one of those like, oh, well, when you don't have it, you always think it's cool. You always want what you don't have, sort of thing. I don't know. But I really liked it nonetheless. Well, now that we have both of our gifts open, what do you say? You want to plug this thing in and check it out? Because I'm dying to. I don't think this thing's been plugged in a little while. All right, so here it is, the Atari Jaguar and Jaguar CD in all of its glory. First thing we got to do, though, is we got to put the controller insert for the game in. Ta-da! All right, here we go. And there's a menu you don't see every day. Ah, Cybermorph music. Look at this. I don't know, holding this thing in my hands now, it makes me realize just how much like, makes me realize just how much like the Dreamcast it was. Wow, this is Wow, I haven't played this in a very long time, but it's very much like Star Fox. Let's see what these. Got to admit, not the most impressive graphics for a first ever 64-bit console. It is kind of interesting seeing where Atari evolved to. Definitely would have been interested to see where they would have ended up. All right, so nothing to write home about with Cybermorph, but I have a little special surprise for you. We're not gonna play any of the pack-ins from the Jaguar CD because I wanna play some Highlander. Oh yeah, still with the mailer. All right, who wants to play some Highlander? And I do have to thank my guy Ryan over at Fire and Ice. He gave me this copy of Highlander for my birthday this year. Thanks, dude. Appreciate you. Oh, it's weird that there's no like click to that. I honestly haven't even tried to boot this up yet, so this will be a first. Here we go. Fingers crossed, folks. If not, we'll just try something else, I guess. I mean, this Jaguar CD is in damn near brand new shape, so don't know why it wouldn't run. Hey, hey, look at that. That's a cool, I mean, for the time, it was a futuristic Atari logo, but look at it now and it's like, wow, how vintage cool. I love this vibe. I mean, you gotta admit, for the time, watching something like this, was pretty mind-blowing back in the day. I will say the placement of the buttons on the controller aren't the best. They probably should have come further this way. I don't know, seems weird. And this animation is way my vibe. All right, we'll skip through this. Let's get to the gameplay. Let's get to the good stuff. Oof. Okay. Oh, tank controls. Yeah, look at that. Is this a bad guy coming after me? It certainly is. Yo, bro, I don't even have a sword, I don't think, do I? Oh my god. Oh, I guess I can punch? Wow. This is true tank controlling right here, guys. Oh my god. This is terrible. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do at this point. Just die, I guess. Yeah. All right, we're gonna try a different game. That is not so good. All right, well, after that stinker, we're gonna try Blue Lightning. How about that? That seems like maybe it might be a better experience. Those visuals ain't bad. Get ready for action. Okay. Boom. Okay. This actually controls pretty decent. Oh no, I've gone down. Well, that was definitely much more fun. That Highlander was a turd. Well, what do you think? Are you super bummed that you missed out in the 90s on the Jaguar and the Jaguar CD? But let's talk about the juicy details. How many games came out for this thing and just how long did it last? On cartridge, there was only 50 licensed games. That's it, 50. I would say that's an easy library to collect, but the console itself is actually very difficult to find. So finding all 50 of these games, not the easiest thing in the world. Among the games that I really remember playing are stuff like Bubsy. I really enjoyed Alien vs. Predator at the time. And believe it or not, there was a basketball game called White Men Can't Jump, based on the movie for the Atari Jaguar, that I liked as well. As far as the Atari CD add-on goes, I think the only thing that I ever really played was Dragon's Lair, because the Atari CD add-on only had 13 games released for it. I mean, the thing was brought to market in September of 1995, I think, and in 1996, all of it was discontinued. The sad thing is, it's not just the Atari Jaguar that went down. It was like Atari as we know it. This was Atari's last attempt at building a video game console or bringing a console to market. Even though Atari is looked at in high regard today, at least by me, they have not made a video game console since. They've re-released stuff like that VCS unit they released a few years ago, which I thought was pretty cool. They've re-released the 2600, which actually was really nice, and it looks like they're re-releasing the 7800. Oddly enough, this year, Atari is celebrating their 50th anniversary. That's 5 years older than I am. So congratulations, Atari. Even though you didn't last as long as everybody else, and there were some shortcomings, I really appreciate what Atari did for our hobby, our passion of video games. If you didn't grow up with some of this stuff, it's probably not looked back on super fondly. In fact, some of the videos I make about the early Atari stuff, like the 2600 games, people flat out mock. But if you grew up playing those games, you would feel differently about them. It's like growing up with Mario 64 being your first platformer, and someone like my kid's age looking at it now and being like, that thing looks terrible. Yeah, of course, it's all perspective. We always look at things through rose-colored glasses, or at least a lot of us do. And when it comes to nostalgic stuff like this, obviously, I love it. So that being said, Atari, I appreciate what you guys have brought to the market over the years. And there's a lot of us out there that do. I really, really love that I still keep all of my old consoles, and I keep them as nice as I possibly can. I don't collect this stuff for monetary reasons. I collect it because, boy, do I love just being around it. So I hope you enjoyed Christmas of 1993 and then Christmas of 1995. If you missed the last retro unboxing, it was a lot of fun. It was Nintendo's first electronic device. You can check that out right here. Also, you should subscribe to the channel right here because you're really not gonna wanna miss what I'm unboxing next week. And until then, enjoy the journey.